Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward, the podcast that reveals how to plan, achieve, and enjoy the journey of creating epic results in your life, business, health, and relationships. Here's your host, best-selling author and motivational speaker, Zander Sprague.
Hello, epic people, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Zander Sprague, and today, this is really exciting. I am joined by Ed Doherty. Ed, tell us a little about who you are and what you do.
Thank you for having me. I'm a consultant. I've been in the consulting business for 4 or 5 years. Prior to that, I operated a nonprofit in New England for 15, and prior to that, I was in the chain restaurant business since I was a teenager.
Wow. Do you want to mention what chains you might have been associated with?
Well, you might remember Perkins or Shoney's. Some people have heard of McDonald's.
A few.
So those are a couple.
Cool. Now, Ed is from, you might notice a bit of an accent. He is from Massachusetts, as I am originally. Ed, one of the things, I don't know if you know this, that you and I share, which is cool, and I do want to talk about it because I think it's truly epic, is you have run Boston, and so have
Yes.
I.
Speaking of starting with one step forward.
Yeah, no doubt. So, when did you run Boston?
I think it was in 2001.
Okay, cool.
And I ran for the Boston Bruins Foundation. I raised $13,000 because, a nonprofit runner, you need a charity sponsor. It only took me 6 hours and 18 minutes, but I was not running for speed. I was running to finish.
Well, Ed, I can tell you, I got to run, not because I time qualified, because this is not a Boston qualifying body, let me tell you. And I'm not currently running marathons anymore, but even when I was, I got in because my younger sister did massage therapy and did post-marathon massage for Adidas, and says to me offhandedly, like one summer afternoon, "Hey, would you ever want to run Boston?" And anyone who's a marathon runner, I'm going to say most marathon runners are like, yes, hello. So I too got in on an exemption, which was great. I ran it in 2014, the year after the bombing.
Yeah, my marathon was a little bit unusual in the sense that there wasn't a Hopkinton to Boston race that year because of the pandemic. So everybody had to run a virtual marathon.
Oh, okay.
My wife was very happy with that because she didn't like the idea of me running 26.2 miles. So I went to her and I said, if I found a route where I could stop every couple of miles, do laps or something, would you be okay? And she said, yes. So my son, my brother, and I had a doctor. He was an obstetrician, but don't tell my wife. I had a doctor on site, and we set up stage at a country music bar patio behind Fenway Park.
Okay.
And that my lap was running on the streets around Fenway Park.
Oh,
and
okay.
I did 47 laps, which equaled 26.2 miles.
Wow. That's a lot of laps, Ed.
I know, it was part of the tour because I had done some 20-mile training runs. And so on Jersey Street, there's the guy who's running a marathon at 70 years old. So I was kind of a celebrity.
Oh, well, that's really cool. Yeah. I get to, being way before we'd even heard of pandemic and stuff. I got to run Hopkinton to Boston. And I do have to say that for me, growing up outside of Boston and then living in Newton and stuff and being a runner, the hardest, honestly, Ed, one of the hardest parts, what made it truly epic was from Framingham all the way in. I already knew the course, and that was really challenging because I knew where all the downhills were. I knew.
Yeah, right.
I had a nightmare one night that I somehow made a wrong turn and found myself on Speen Street in Natick and I had to run up Route 9 to Wellesley, and I'm trying to get through the crowd to get back on the course at Wellesley Hills. Really not a good dream, Ed, let me tell you.
Yeah. Well, that actually happened to me. I was running a race in Worcester. It was some kind of running festival, and I was running a 5K, but I took a wrong turn. There must have been another race going on, and the next thing I know, I'm running side by side with this guy, and there's a police escort, and so I end up finishing second, but I have no idea how far I ran, and I
Second
wasn't
for a
much
race
of a
that you
celebrity.
actually didn't enter, but okay. Well, hey, at least you got on the podium, Ed.
Yeah, right.
That's true. That is good. Your Boston experience, obviously, because of the pandemic, was, we'll call it non-traditional, because you
Yes.
couldn't. Were there people along the way cheering you on and stuff?
Well, interestingly enough, NBC Boston
Yeah.
thought it would be very interesting to cover a 70-year-old man on marathon day running around Fenway Park, and they did.
Cool.
So at 5:30, I have a microphone and lights in my face, and then I stepped off, and the problem was the Red Sox had made the playoffs, and the first home game was that day. So I had to finish the race and get everybody out of there before the parking, went skyrocketing. Yeah. So there's actually like a 10-minute segment of me on NBC of running the race. And what happened was, because people were in town for the marathon, they saw me on TV and they came out and ran with me to they made a donation to run with me because they had seen me on TV.
Oh, that's really cool.
So it was really cool.
That is cool. You've done a lot of epic things in your life, Ed. And I guess my first question for you is, you spent many years in food services, I guess is best way to describe it. How did you get into that and choose that as one of your careers?
It's simple, very simple. When I was a kid, my mother used to make homemade French fries.
Yeah.
The kind where she'd shake them in a brown paper bag with salt. And one day, a fast food restaurant opened up about a mile from our house. And she said to me, "I bet if you worked there, you could eat French fries free." And I walked down and I got a job and I ate French fries free every day I worked there.
Oh, that's awesome. And how did it turn into a career? Because lots of people, I worked at a Burger King when I was in college just to earn some money and stuff. But
I did that too. I worked fast food when I was in college, and then I got out of school. I didn't have anything lined up. I was getting married, and I walked into a McDonald's and I said, "Are you hiring?" And they said yes, and I could work a grill. So I just took a part-time job, killing time while I got a job. And then the regional manager said, "Would you consider a career in management?" And I was thinking about the notice that was going to be in the newspaper about my wedding. Mm-hmm. And it just management trainee sounded better than unemployed. So I said yes.
Cool.
Unfortunately, a month after I started, I was in a very bad car accident. And in the hospital, that same regional manager told my wife, "We'll take care of your husband. Don't worry about anything." And they paid me for 5 months, and I had only worked there a month.
Oh, wow.
So I was very loyal, and I went on to become, a big shot, if you will. And
well, sure. You could, Ed, own it. If you worked your way up and were doing all kinds of really cool things, it's kind of like saying that we're Boston Marathon finishers. Our time doesn't matter.
Well, one of the restaurants I was responsible for was across the street from Fenway Park, and that's where I did the all-nighter with Larry Bird.
Oh, cool.
The store was brand new. He was a rookie with the Celtics, and he was doing his first TV commercial for McChicken sandwiches.
Yeah.
And many people have seen the duel between him and Michael Jordan, where they're throwing something and it bouncing.
Yeah.
Well, that started that night. He crumpled up his bag, threw it off the menu board. It bounced on the register, and a 4-year-old kid slam dunked it into the trash bin. And that was the start of the Larry Bird, Michael Jordan exercise.
Oh, that's really cool. That's a great story, Ed.
During the beginning, there were all kinds of hangers on there, executives and so forth. And then it took till 4 a.m. to film it. And about 11 o'clock, they all left. And prior to that, Larry had a Winnebago, that he went to on the breaks.
Sure.
And once all the big shots left, he didn't go out. He just hung on a break. He just hung around and hung with us. And all the extras were employees of the restaurant, so we just hung out with Larry Bird till 4 a.m.
Oh, that's really cool, Ed. That's an awesome story. That's an awesome story. I also understand that you wrote a book.
Yeah.
Look at you.
So my book was published earlier this year. I'm 73 now. And the book is a collection of my life experiences, stories like the all-nighter with Larry Bird and like the marathon of different things I've experienced. And there's a lesson or a message in each one of them. There's 60 stories. So I joke, it is absolutely perfect for an airplane ride because you can read a story while you're waiting, and then after the safety, and then you can read another story, and then the beverage, and it's perfect.
And that's great. And also, like you don't I assume that the stories are not so long that if you're coming in to land and you're like, I got to go, you're not like, oh no, I'm halfway through the chapter.
It's a pretty fast read.
Well, that's great. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I too have written some books, and I know what goes into it. I know what an epic journey that whole process is. I joke that about my books, that when they first came out, I actually didn't want to read my books for a couple months because I just read my whole book like 6 or 7 times in a couple months and doing all the editing and reading for changes and looking for errors and stuff. That I got done my books. They came out and I'm like, I honestly can't pick it up because
I can relate to that.
I know what I said. I've read it so much. I love what I said, but I don't want to reread it again.
Yeah, so, I have a book right here, and every now and then I'll pick it up and look at a chapter. But
no, absolutely. Look, I look at my book. I look at my book now. I'm just saying, when it first came out, I was kind of like, boy, do I know my book. I've just spent months reading it and rereading it and stuff. Like, yeah, I know how this story ends. I just read it 5 times. So anyway, well, that's really cool. What was it why did you decide to run Boston?
Well, speaking of one step forward, my wife suggested that maybe I should get off the couch and start walking one day. And I've been married 50 years. And the one thing you know about me is I listen to my wife. And so I walked and I walked and I walked more than 400 days in a row. And one day I said, maybe I could run. And I ran 100 yards and I was like, whoa. And I decided, okay, tomorrow I'm going to run a half mile or a mile. And I went, whoa. And so then I decided that I was going to take up running. I was 60 years old and I said, I'm going to take up running. And so I ran in a 5K and I was in training. And of course, I messed up my knee, as all idiots who do something they don't know, not qualified. I went to physical therapy. My therapist, Sarah, fixed me and turned into my running coach.
Oh, cool.
And so I said, I bet I could do a 10K. And they had a 10K at the Patriots Stadium that finished at the 50. Talk about motivation.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I did that. And then I realized, hey, a 10K, I can run a little bit slower. I don't have, and so I started running 10Ks. And then after a couple of years, I went to Sarah and I said, I think I can do a half marathon.
Yeah.
And she said, it's about time. So I said, okay. So I ran a half marathon at Hampton Beach, nice and flat. Then I ran another one. And then I ran another one. And then I went to Sarah and I said, I might be able to do a marathon. And she said, of course you can. So I started training to run a marathon. And looking back, I find it hard to believe that I did it. But I did 500 training miles in that calendar year before running the marathon.
Wow. That's great. Yeah, I get it. I mean, my journey to being an endurance running athlete was, I was working in a Fortune 100 company, and really wanted to exercise. And what I found was, even though we had a gym I could go to for free, I was so stressed trying to get to the gym at lunchtime to do my workout to reduce my stress that I'm like, this is ridiculous, right? Like, I'm so stressed out because I'm like, all right, I get in there and I can go do my 20 minutes of cardio and I can get a little, free weights in, but then I got to quickly shower and get back to my desk because I have a meeting. I'd get back and I'm be like, I'm more stressed having tried to exercise to reduce my stress. So I'm like, what can I do? I'm like, and I was traveling a bit and I'm like, my manager who was a runner's like, yeah, you can run no matter where you are. You just need, shoes and whatever the appropriate clothing is. And it can be a great way if you're in a city you don't know to explore it. Now, theoretically, that is true, Ed, but I can tell you that if you don't know the city and you go out for a 5-mile run, it can be its own epic adventure because you're like, I don't know where I started. If you're in a country where English is not the first language, you don't speak that language, it could be even harder to find your way back to where you were because I don't know. I'm in the Hilton. Which one? There are 4 of them, so. But I did. I started off with a half marathon, and I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And you might have had this feeling, which was perhaps you did the first 5K and you crossed the finish and you were really excited, but you asked yourself, now what? I mean, that was really great. I feel, but like 5 minutes later, you're kind of like, now what? Like, that's over. That's in the rearview mirror. Yeah. So then you sign up for another one. And I found that obviously signing up for races was very motivating to keep running. Certainly when you get up to the half marathon and marathon, I certainly was not the person like, I just for fun, I'm going to go out and run 15 miles. Just, wow, that sounds great.
Well, the 2 surprises for me about running the marathon. First of all, I realized when we set goals for ourselves, we generally set easily achievable goals. I was really challenged by the marathon. Prioritization took a different step. The second thing is I was in shock at the feedback I got from people who said they were inspired by my effort. I didn't set out to inspire anybody. I just set out to, give it a shot. And people kept telling me how proud they were of me. And so, I guess maybe when I was in 3rd grade, people told me they were proud, but I couldn't remember too much after that. So those were the 2 biggest surprises.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, for the audience, if you haven't done it, both Ed and I can attest that 26.2 miles is a really long way. Okay. And I know that for me, when I started doing the halves and stuff, I would mentally break the races. So for marathon, for me, the first goal was the half because then I had less. I was more than halfway done. Yep. And then it was mile 17 because then I only had 9 miles left. And then it was mile 20 because, well, if I made it this far, it's only 10K more and I made it this far. And then you get to count down. But I think kind of that chunking of it, making it easier. I also found that I honestly wish on marathons they didn't put up a mile sign until mile 5 because hard as you try not to think about, you see mile 2 and you're like, I got 24 more miles.
I know.
And especially with you doing, laps.
Well,
you don't want to be like, oh, only 45 more.
Let me tell you what I did to handle that mental aspect of it. So I took athletic tape and I covered the inside of my arm, both arms, with the names of donors.
Okay, cool.
And so what I did is as I passed the Ted Williams statue on Lansdowne Street, I would go to the next donor and I would think about that person and my relationship with them for the whole mile.
Oh, that's so cool.
So it was good. I still got the tape. I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
I would hold on to it. That was, I have to say, people ask, when I say I ran Boston and stuff, and someone's like, oh, was that a bucket list? I'm like, no, that honestly was a holy grail moment because I grew up watching it.
Yeah.
And then when I became, a marathoner, I was like, well, of course I want to run Boston. And, if I'm honest, when I think about doing that turn off of Hereford Street onto Boylston, I get a little misty.
Oh, I can't.
But the one thing I can say, my cousin who time qualified for Boston, ran it many times, said to me, he said, look, when you turn off of Hereford and you get onto Boylston, he's like, you're going to want to start to like run for it. And he's like, but you're not even at mile 26. It's still a couple blocks down.
Yeah, right.
So he's like, don't do it. Otherwise, you will have made it that far and you will just burn yourself out.
Right. That's sacred turf. And I run in the BAA 5K and 10K, and both of them go over that same ground turn on Hereford Street.
Yeah.
And the Saturday before the marathon, I had walked up Boylston Street to Fenway Park.
Yeah.
And so I knew exactly where the bombs went off.
Yeah.
And every time I run it, I just stop and bow and, think about it.
Definitely. And I obviously thought a lot about it because it was the year after.
Yeah.
When I was running, there were paved helicopters like flying overhead. There was all kinds of National Guard along the way. There was a heavy presence, but all the people were out there supporting me. And I totally agree that complete stranger support really does make a difference, especially if you're having, as one does in a marathon, what I call some of the grindy moments where the running isn't coming as easily as you would hope. And you're like, but I got to just keep taking that one step forward because I'm one step closer to my goal.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite quotes is from Calvin Coolidge.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful people with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent.
Absolutely. That's a great quote.
I saw that on a restaurant wall when I was 21 years old, and it's always hanging wherever I'm working.
That's great. So here's a question, Ed. How can people find your book? How can if they are inspired by you and want to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you?
So the book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's in both paperback and ebook. And I'm going into the studio next week to record an audiobook because my friends tell me I write like I talk, so I might as well talk the book. So
absolutely.
The best way to connect with me probably is on LinkedIn. Edward J. Doherty, and I do a weekly weblog. I do new stories every week.
Cool.
And the original book was a collection of 60 of my weblogs. So you can find a weblog there and you can subscribe if you'd like. And my website for my business is ambroselandon.com.
Okay, great. Well, Ed, I want to thank you so much. It has been so much fun talking to a fellow Boston finisher. And, certainly you have led an epic life and I hope that you continue to do so.
Let me end you with one quote from my mother.
Sure.
I was talking, she was 94 years old. I used to visit her a couple of times a week. And one day she looked at me after I was telling her everything that was going on. She says to me, you lead a very interesting life and it's all your fault.
That's a good one. I like that. Well, Ed, I want to thank you so much. I want to remind everyone that if you are ready to begin your epic journey, go to epicbegins.com. And right now, if you go there, you can get a free e-copy of my book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward, How to Plan, Achieve, and Enjoy the Journey. As always, remember, epic choices lead to the epic life that you want.
Get your gift copy of the award-winning book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward, at epicbegins.com. That's a wrap on this episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward with your host, Zander Sprague, best-selling author, internationally acclaimed public speaker, and licensed professional clinical counselor. To make your next conference or event epic, send an email to Zander at zander@epicbegins.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, epic choices, epic life.